Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Life in Sport podcast. And I'm joined by a former NRL player. He played for the Brisbane Broncos, my beloved Brisbane Broncos. He also played for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs and the Melbourne Storm. And I mean, that's an amazing set list of teams, given that two of them are powerhouses, and the Bulldogs have been around for longer than both of those clubs. So that's an amazing feat in itself. Dennis Scott, thank you for joining us. And how's your morning going so far?
Mate, it's going well. As I just mentioned to you before, I'm really battling the holiday blues. I've just come out of a 12-day period where I've been at Noosa. I'm relaxing on the beach, and now I've got to get my head back around all things landscaping and selling houses in Australia.
Yeah, fair. Well, we'll touch on those topics as in landscaping and selling houses in Australia towards the back end, which is great to talk about because it's a very interesting and very niche thing that not many former players have, sort of got into in that sort of media aspect. But let's get started. You were born in Moranbah and grew up in Queensland. What was it like playing junior footy in Queensland?
Hot, mate. It was very hot in central Queensland. It was hot and full of prickles. Most fields were not very manicured in nature. So, mate, there was a lot of bindy eyes and all that sort of stuff
So you
going
wouldn't be
on.
playing barefoot back then.
No, mate. I didn't start playing till I was, I think, 14 or 13. So I
Oh,
was
wow.
straight into boots. Yeah, straight into boots. And then, mate, I was privileged enough to play with the likes of Travis Norton, Clinton Schifosky. So where I grew up at Moranbah, coal mining town, it actually had quite a significant
Breeding ground, you
ab-
could say.
abundance of great players.
Absolutely. And as you just mentioned, two great legends of the game, Clinton being a Raiders legend and obviously Travis being a Cowboys legend as well. What was it like? Obviously, you said it was very prickly on the fields growing up playing in Moranbah. But then you went down, sorry, technically to Brizzy and played for the Broncos. You got graded for them in first grade. What was it like? And also, were they the team that you followed growing up?
Well, I didn't really follow a team growing up, to tell you the truth.
Ah,
I didn't grow up on a cattle property, so we didn't really get much of an opportunity to watch the footy. So we were probably the BRL, I guess. And then when the
yeah.
Broncos came in, we definitely had a bit of an interest in it, but I didn't particularly follow any
Did you
set
have a team in
side.
the BRL?
Not really. Probably South, where Mal Meninga was sort of, I
Yeah.
guess, located. I
Yes,
was a
South
Bob Linder
Magpies.
fan.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was a
Bob
Bob
Linder.
Linder
Yep.
fan growing up. So that was probably the team that I would have supported.
Yep.
And then to get the opportunity to go to a club like the Broncos, which at that point in time were probably at the peak of its powers, whereas everyone sort of in that Queensland mode loved it. And now you've got the North Queensland Cowboys, the Titans. So people have got some choice, whereas
And the
back then,
Dolphins starting this
yeah,
year
well,
as well.
of course, the Dolphins coming in as well. So Broncos were at the peak of their powers. Everyone sort of loved them, a bit like now. You either love them or you loathe them. Yeah,
Yep.
they're going through
I
some
love them.
troubles at the moment. So it was fantastic, honestly, as a 17-year-old to get an opportunity to come down to Brisbane and play with a club like that and under a coach like Wayne Bennett was, mate, it was pretty awesome.
That's amazing to hear. And it wasn't long. Obviously, you didn't have a long tenure at the Broncos, but you did get another shot in the NRL, and that was with the Bulldogs, where you played over 100 NRL games for them. So, first of all, congratulations, because that's a big feat in itself, playing one game, let alone 100. What was it like at the Bulldogs? Obviously, because you played during that '04 season and around that time where the Bulldogs started becoming a powerhouse club again. What was it like going from Brisbane right all the way down to the Bulldogs?
Very different. I moved straight down to Belmore, which was definitely a bit of a culture shock for a country boy.
Yep.
But I mean, it was, the Broncos sort of probably set me up with a great foundation. And there's a bit of story, I guess, leading into going to Canterbury.
Yeah,
Uh,
please.
5 years at Brisbane, and then I got through to the next off season, and it was just so hard to compete against the likes of Brad Thorne, Shane Webke,
Tony
Peter
Carroll.
Ryan. Yeah, it was just incredible. So I started a preseason at the Bronx, and then Wayne came up and spoke to me, and he sort of said, "Oh, look, I just don't know whether we're going to keep you or let you go." And this was halfway through a preseason. I was like, "Bloody hell, that's a bit rough." Like, I've
Yeah.
already done half a preseason. And then he came back and he spoke to me about a week later, and he said, "Look, I'm going to let you go, but I want you to go to Canterbury." And I said, "Well, mate, whether Canterbury want me or not, that's a different story. I can't
Yeah.
just like click fingers and all of a sudden demand that a club has me.
Picks
But
me up. Yeah.
he had a great connection with Bob Hagan. Him and Bob Hagan were great mates. Bob Hagan was
Yeah.
the CEO. And within 72 hours, Canterbury had flown to Brisbane and sat down with myself and my manager, and we nutted it out. And pretty much I was heading to Sydney, which is something that I sort of never ever wanted to do. I sort of said to myself I didn't really want to go to Sydney, but I also sort of on the flip side of the coin said if I don't go, then I'm always going to have these questions of
Like,
what
what
if
if?
and like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I didn't want to be sitting in a pub in 20 years' time and someone sort of saying, "Oh, you didn't make it," and I go, "Well, I'd rather go. Well, I failed trying than you sat here and just we're
Exactly.
drinking beers." So Sydney was fantastic. It was a different stage of my life. My wife came down and. We had 6 fantastic years at Canterbury. It was a bit of a roller coaster,
It
but
would have been with the O2 season and then the O4
yeah,
season.
02, 04. I think there was another one in there somewhere, mate. I don't know.
What
It's all a
what was the
but
O2 season like? Obviously, as you said, it's a blur now, but like obviously everyone who follows rugby league will know the infamous,
salary
BS that
cap
was going on with
scandal.
salary cap stuff that was going on. You as a player, were you aware of that of what was going on, or were you just kept in the dark sort of thing? If you don't mind me asking.
No, look, I wasn't aware of, I guess, the magnitude of
Okay, yep.
what was happening. As far as I didn't know what, Marco Mealy was on. I didn't know what Willie
Well,
Mason was
you wouldn't
on.
really discuss that with teammates, would you?
Well, no, not really. Some people like to sort of slip it in and make
Yep.
mention of it, but mate, I was never a big money player, so I didn't have anything to skite about. So I guess I sort of, in a way, the way they dealt with me, I figured, oh, maybe that's probably the way that some other people are being dealt with. But as I say, to the magnitude of it, I had no idea.
Yep.
And then once it all came out, it was obviously a big shock to the system. And I was sort of right on the cusp at that stage because I'd played enough first grade and I was selected to play first grade that week. But then Steve Folkes rang me the morning of the game and said, look, you've got two options here. You can play first grade, which I want you to play first grade. You're obviously
Fit
good enough to
enough
be in
and
the
all that.
first grade. Yeah, to get in the first grade side. And I understand if that's what you want to do. But then he goes, well, you can also, help some young guys out or younger guys. I wasn't exactly old, but he said you can help some younger guys out and you can bite the bullet and go back and play reserve grade because I was right on that eligibility roll. Like I
Yep.
hadn't played too many first grade. If I played one more first grade game, I wasn't eligible to go back to reserve grade. So he sort of
Gotcha.
said, do you want to go back to reserve grade? And then, there's a possibility of maybe keeping our club sort of I guess, in the
In the
headlines
green,
and
yeah.
yeah, and going well and possibly winning a premiership. So I sort of said, look, let me think about it. So I rang Darren Smith and Steve, a few players that were playing first grade, and
Yep.
it was 50-50. Everyone was like, mate, you don't play football to play reserve grade, you play football to play first grade. And
That's true.
so I was like, geez, like what do I do? But then, mate, I made the decision to go back and play reserve grade, and it was probably a great decision. I played with some fantastic players back there as well, Stephen Hughes and all that sort of stuff during that 2002 year. And mate, we ended up going through and winning the premiership.
Which is amazing given unfortunately which I reckon the Dogs, if they hadn't have been stripped of the points and all that sort of stuff, and as in the first grade club, would have also gone on to win the grand final that year in both grades. But unfortunately it's it is what it is, but it's good to hear that you guys managed to get the win in the reserve grade. And then 2 years later, 2004 season rocks up. Unfortunately, you didn't play
Yeah.
in the grand final, but you were part of that season. And as they say, it's not just 17 guys on a field on the grand final day. It's a whole club. It's a staff. It's all them that take you and get you to that grand final. What was that season like for you?
The season was great. I mean, my whole time at Canterbury was awesome. The whole 6 years that we were there, I mean, we did have a couple of years where we were a bit lean, but it's just an attitude around the club that they just want to win. They were
Yeah.
winners regardless. Like we'd never faced a side that we didn't think we couldn't beat at that
Yeah.
point in time. I think Folksy was always positive about
And
where
I don't think that's an arrogance either. I think that's a confidence in your
no,
abilities.
absolutely. And when you look at the side, like
It was
there was
stacked.
nothing. Yeah, it was stacked, but there was no like just individual
There were no
players.
superstars.
No, not at all. So it was just all together. That combination that we just sort of had, it just worked. It gelled
Yeah,
together. I mean, you had the likes of big Darren Britt, who, mate, he'd be the last person if you looked at him that you'd think was a professional athlete.
yeah.
But he
You
was
had
just a superstar. It was like his leadership qualities.
Jonathan Thurston as
Yeah,
well.
Thurston, correct,
Like,
mate. It's there's an array of names and players there that just together came together and we had a great time. Sadly, yes, I did get injured, and I think it was about 6 games out. And ironically, it was against in the Melbourne Storm game, which
oh
I
wow.
went to join. Um, and I missed out. Look, I was bitterly disappointed, and sort of still look back on it as a really lost opportunity to have got a legit grand final ring, even though I do have a grand final ring. But
I think it's still, as you said, as a player, like you didn't play in the game, so it may not mean as much, maybe like as it would have to you if you'd have played in the grand final. But as I said, it takes a squad, it takes a club, it takes a staffing, it takes a whole organization to get a grand final win in a season. So honestly, you're just as important as the 17 blokes that played that game on that night.
yeah, thank you. I do try and tell myself that sometimes when I look back on it, but yeah, look, it's a difficult one. It's one that you're competitive, you want to be involved in the game and so forth. So there's always going to be that lingering sort of, I wished I was playing. But mate, as you say, to be involved in a club and be involved in a premiership winning club and the parties afterwards and all that sort of stuff, there's mate, I've got plenty of stories to be able to tell my kids and anyone that wants to listen, mate. So it's
That's fair. I've just thought of a question real quick. It's about that. It's a would you rather, but it's because as you said, you were injured 6 weeks out from the big dance, and unfortunately,
yeah.
you said sometimes you think about what if. Well, Nico Hines sat on the bench the entire 80 minutes of that 2020 grand final. Would you rather have done that or been injured and not played at all, like sort of thing?
I think I would have rather been injured and not been
Yeah,
able to play. Like, to sit on the bench for 80 minutes and legit know that you're able to go out on the field.
yeah,
I think that would have crushed me even more. But to know that you're injured, but have contributed to the year, I think
yeah,
for me sits better in my mind than having to
yeah.
sit on that bench knowing that
And
you're going to
that's
be.
not a shot at Nico either. Anyone that's
No,
listening,
not at
that's not
all.
a shot. I just wasn't sure because they're definitely two similar but very different situations.
Yeah, and I mean, mate, the proof's in the pudding, though. Like the character of Nico Hines,
Oh,
mate, it just
yeah,
shines. Like he got on with it. He partied, he celebrated, he did whatever he had to do because he contributed to that year. And then, mate,
absolutely.
look at him now, and look at the year after. I
Superstar.
think it's pretty good. Yeah, absolutely. So, hats off to both situations, mate. Honestly, it's difficult either way. But as a sports person, you're competitive. You just want to get out there and play and help your
Yeah.
mates.
Yeah, that's it. That's absolutely it. And it's amazing. And as you said, you went from the Bulldogs that year in 2004 to the Storm in 2005, which ended up being your final year in the NRL. What was it like again going down to another city further south, down in Victoria, and all that sort of stuff for you?
It was almost like going to a deportment school.
Wow.
It was the three clubs that I went to were at different stages of my life. So, I was young and impressionable when I came under Wayne, and he was a
Yep.
real father figure and just sort of guided you into and massaged you what you had to be. And then he actually let me go to Canterbury. And he wanted me to go to Canterbury to try and learn my craft because that was a more forward orientated
Mm-hmm.
club.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
under Steve Folkes was incredible, and really sort of learnt my craft. And I knew Craig from Brisbane when Craig Bellamy was a trainer at Brisbane. So
Yep.
it just was a chance meeting with Craig that then I was about to sign with Canterbury, but a chance meeting at a game, and Craig said, "Don't sign yet. Come down to Melbourne. We'll show you around." And my wife is pregnant with our first daughter, so it was sort of we just sort of had enough of the Sydney life and that
Yep.
roller coaster of salary cap scandals and sex scandals and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean,
So
luckily you didn't stay at the Storm for too long because obviously that salary cap
yeah,
scandal later on.
mate, yeah, correct. So going to Melbourne, but under Craig was like a finishing school. It was almost
Yep.
like it had a half cut diamond, but then he just tried to polish it up and made me into a bit more of a ball player and made me use my smarts a little bit more instead of sort of trying to use your
Use your
brawn.
brawn. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily have all the brawn in the world anyway. So, mate, it was really good. So each club I sort of went to, it was almost a transition in life as I sort
Yep.
of went through it. So it was great for my career.
That's awesome. Did you end up going to any AFL games while you were down there?
Yeah, I went to a few. I'm a
Do you have a
Demon
team?
supporter.
Oh, okay.
Demon. Yeah,
I'm a,
yeah,
I'm
I'm
a
a Demon
Collingwood
supporter.
fan.
Yeah, right. Well, we went to a few Collingwood games
Yep.
because Collingwood, we were sort of training with Collingwood sort of in
Yep.
the same vicinity. But yeah, no, I didn't have much luck, mate. We sort of got forced to choose a side when you're down there. My wife,
Yeah.
we lived in Richmond, so my wife chose Richmond, so she had instant success when we sort of went down there. It was like Richmond everywhere.
Yep.
So I chose the Demons because I had a mate that he's a Demon supporter. So
You
sadly
would have
we
loved
had
it, the grand final in 2021.
absolutely it was awesome, but yeah, we're sort of struggling a bit now since then. We should be doing a bit better than what we're doing.
I agree. Still made finals though, but wait, you did make finals 2022, didn't you? Or maybe I'm confused.
Yeah, yeah, made
Yeah.
finals, but it was an instant bomb out. Like it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was. There's a bit of in-house fighting going on there by the sounds of it.
That, and I also think that it's harder to go back to back because, teams sort of figure you out after that grand final sort of thing.
Yeah, correct. I agree. And they just played a tough and tenacious and determined football all year, and they were
They did.
consistent. So,
Yeah.
and I think being injury free for a predominant part of that is a huge success to to
Yeah.
to be able to win a grand final, and that's one of the biggest keys for an NRL side. If you can remain healthy, that's a huge part.
Oh, absolutely. So I've got some quick fire questions and then we'll go in and talk about selling houses Australia and your retirement and whatnot. So the quick fire
Yep.
questions are, first of all, what's your beer of choice?
Beer of choice can't beat a cold Corona on a hot summer's day, but beer of choice, I don't mind a good schooner or two is new.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say maybe Forex because you're a Queenslander, but Tui's new.
No,
Okay.
I'm not. To tell you the truth, I don't want to. I'm not. I don't particularly like Forex that much. I can drink
Neither
it,
do
but
I. I
yeah,
prefer Great
don't
Northern
mind,
over Forex.
yeah, don't mind it too is new.
Yeah, nice. How do you like your steak?
Medium rare.
Yeah, the only way to have it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Apple or Android?
Apple all the way. I'm Apple phones, Apple iMacs, MacBook
Yep.
Airs. We're an Apple family.
Absolutely agreed with that. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, geez, as a kid, it would have been Top Gun. I watched it 1,000 times. Mate, I tell
You
you,
can say
Shawshank
Top Gun now.
Redemption.
Shawshank's
Yeah,
also a good one.
well, no, I'd probably be more leaning towards Shawshank Redemption or something like that. In the Name of the Father, a Daniel Day-Lewis movie, which
Yeah.
I was very impressionable. Which, yeah, it's something like that. Mind
Yeah,
you,
nice.
yeah. Look, I'm not a huge movie buff, but I'd say Shawshank Redemption.
That's one of the main answers I get from guests. They either say Shawshank or they say Green Mile or something like those sort of
Yeah, I tell
cinematic
you, I
masterpieces
mean,
because I love both of those films as well.
yeah, mate, you can't go past Forrest Gump either, just
No, you
quietly
can't.
for an absolute classic. But
You
I
really
mean,
can't.
Shawshank Redemption, it had it all. It had a
It
good
has
storyline,
everything.
yeah, good plot. It had a bit of action, and yeah, sort of kept you interested.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously, what's your favorite type of music?
Mate, no, this is genuine. Apart from heavy metal, mate, I
Mm,
will listen to anything. Like, doesn't
yeah,
mind me.
nice.
As long as it's on the radio and it's going and it's sort of, what, a bit of tunes. But yeah, I'm not into that sort of heavy metal.
You see, whereas I'm a
Uh,
metalhead, but I'll also listen to anything.
yeah, well, I'm not I'm not into that like Pantera stuff and all that sort of thing. But a bit of Gunners in the background is
Yeah,
fine as long as
nice.
it's sort of not blaring away. Mate, I'll listen to anything.
Yeah, fair. And there's another final quick fire question before we get into wrapping it up with selling houses,
Yep.
retirement, and all that. What are your thoughts on the Dolphins coming into the comp? Because what I thought was you played in basically the last sort of era when there was an odd amount of teams, there was
Yep.
15 before the Titans, and then it was Titans all the way through, and now there's another odd number with 17. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the Dolphins joining and how it's all going to go in general for the NRL?
Um, I think it's going to create some headaches
Yep.
for the NRL, being an odd number of teams. So whether that means one has to go or we actually have to try and incorporate another one, I just don't think there's enough players to incorporate another side.
I agree. Well,
Um,
if so, which club do you think folds? Like, if it turns out to
yeah,
go awry for them?
and that's a really tough one because I mean all clubs are.
My
Yeah, I
choice is the
just
Titans. I've always said this, and it's not because I'm a Broncos fan. It's because um they've not made a grand final since they were
they haven't
implemented.
haven't yeah
They haven't
they've
made a
only made
grand final.
the semis once,
They've only
haven't
made the
they?
semis. They've got more spoons than they've got finals appearances.
Yeah,
Now, granted, the Warriors haven't won a grand final either, but they've made two grand finals since their inception. I just think the Titans, I hate to say it to anyone who's listening who's a Titans fan, I just think that if shit goes pear shaped for the NRL because of this, and they need to let a club go, that it needs to be the Titans, or maybe put them in Q Cup instead, so they can still exist.
yeah, I do tend to agree with you. I just honestly, I do just think it was. I wouldn't have put in the Dolphins. I would have waited at least another 12 months,
Yep.
2 years, and then brought a side in.
Yeah.
Let it sort of find out its feet a little bit. Like I think they've, with
Rusted a
the
bit.
trouble that had to attract a marquee player and all that sort of stuff, I don't think they sort of thought it was going to be that difficult.
Yep.
I think Redcliffe are blessed because they've got such a good following with
Yep.
their local club that they've instantly got a bit of success in that way. But look, I think the Dolphins will do better than what people are giving them a chance of
Yep.
doing.
I
I
agree
don't
with
think
that.
they'll get the wooden spoon.
No.
But they'll struggle for a few years. So
Yep.
I mean, look, if I was in charge of the NRL, which mate, there's much smarter men than me in charge of the NRL, I probably would have held off for another 18 months to 2 years before I sort of brought another side in.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair enough, and I agree with that. And I also agree with the statement of they're going to do better than people think. I definitely don't, Ed, do not see them making top eight, but I definitely don't see them making the spoon. I think personally, I think we'll see them maybe go between 11th and 14th, maybe.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I was going to say probably 10 to 14 or something like that. 10 to, yeah, but I think they'll surprise a few people. I mean,
Yeah,
mate, Wayne Bennett hasn't been doing what he's been doing for however long to be going into a side
yeah,
and be wanting to win a wooden spoon, like
absolutely.
and Redcliffe itself, as far as the amount of money that they've spent and the NRL, they're not going to be wanting to win a wooden spoon.
No,
They're going to
gosh,
be
no,
going in there, they're going to be trying to play as
and
hard
turn heads while doing it.
absolutely. So I just think their facilities and everything up there, they've got that right, but just the amount of players that we've got as far as quality goes in the game at the moment, I think we're probably a little bit light on, and we
Yep,
probably could have waited sort of that 18 months before we sort
yeah,
of pulled the trigger. It just seemed to happen really quickly for
it
me.
did.
Like I know
It really
you're
did.
thinking about it, but yeah,
Like when the NRL announced that the Dolphins, the whoever the club was going to be, because there was
yeah,
amongst a few that had bidded. I was word vomit. I wasn't expecting to hear the announcement until like 6 months after it was announced, sort of thing. I
yeah.
was preparing for the May, but we found out in like the November sort of thing.
Yeah, and I was sort of going, well, if they're going to make the announcement, it'd probably come in at 2024 and not 2023. So I
Yeah,
mean, it's
exactly.
been a really condensed section to get a team together and get all this sort of stuff happening. And then actually now,
A
we're
month and a
only
bit.
yeah, I know, 8 weeks away from the start of the season. Like it's just or 6, yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
man,
well, and it's an extended season as well. There's 27 rounds now instead of 25, and there's three
yeah.
buys like for every club throughout the season because it's a round of buy. Um, yeah, it's insane, but I think it's good. But I also definitely think they should have and could have waited.
Yeah.
Let's get started on talking about your retirement from the NRL. First of all, how was the transition from retirement? Sorry, from the NRL into retirement.
Shithouse,
Yeah,
mate.
sounds about right.
It was, mate. It was shit, mate. It was, you sort of, it was like finishing grade 12 again, and you go, what do I want to do?
Yeah,
It was a shock to the system, and I thought I was actually pretty prepared. I'd done a diploma of sports journalism. I had a work background. I was a mechanic by trade, so I had a trade under my belt. Look, the NRL say that they, have got this education and welfare stuff happening, but you know, they're trying to find these players like just easy trainees jobs and bits and pieces just so they can tick a box, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yep.
Um,
I kind of
and
tend to agree with you.
no matter how prepared you think you are,
You're
mate,
not until it happens.
you're not prepared. Like you're back in the big bad world. You know, when you're playing football, you're told what to wear to training, what time to get to training, what
It's
to
basically
eat,
like school.
drink,
It's structured.
drinking. Oh, absolutely. And you're told what time flight. So you don't have to think for yourself. And then all of a sudden you come out in the big bad world and you've got to do everything yourself, mate. It's a shock to the system. So, mate, when I retired, look, I did everything from labour hire to, mate, I was stacking shelves at Woolies to make ends meet in the middle of the night, and mate, you just got to do what you got to do. I had a young family.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of young guys out there, or a lot of guys out there that probably won't be prepared to do that. So,
Yeah.
and I do think that in a lot of cases, there's a lot of marquee players that go into these so-called welfare roles who have never particularly had to work a day in their life anyway. Like, they get
Yeah.
straight back into the club because of their playing careers and whatever, which is great. But I just don't know whether they're the right people to be trying to teach these young kids
About
the harsh,
resilience and all that sort of
the
stuff.
harsh facts of actually getting out there and bloody, working.
Yep. No, I tend to agree with you. And you did a carpentry apprenticeship, which also led into what is now selling houses as Australia and also Lush Landscapes. So, first of all, how is that apprenticeship for you? Because, as you said, you'd already had a trade under your belt as a mechanic, and so going into another trade. So, how was the transition going into that? And then, how did selling houses come about for you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one. I sort of did a little bit of landscaping, then I went into carpentry, and because it was going to complement my landscaping, and then
Yep.
within that business, who I was sort of working with a mate, he sort of got asked about some landscaping stuff into some high-end developments, and I said, well, why don't we do it? And then we did it, and then we sort of had this little business inside, which is my business now, Lush Landscape Solutions.
Yep.
Mate, it just got to the point where it was too busy for me to do the carpentry and the landscaping, and
Yep.
then he basically offered it for me for $1 and said, mate, take it. Why don't you go for it and have a crack at it? And that was, I was 38 or something, or 39, mate. So I was like, well, now's my chance. Let's do
Yeah.
it. And then it just happened to be one day another mate of mine who's got a little landscape business very similar to me. It's not big. He sent me a link for an audition for Selling Houses Australia, and I sort of looked at it for a couple of days, and I went, you know what? I'm going to do that. So I didn't tell my kids or anything like that. But again,
Just
it
in
was like
case you
that.
didn't get it, sort of thing.
Well, it's sort of like that same situation. I just go, well, I'm better off having a crack at it and
Yep.
failing, and at least I know that I've ticked that box.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I try and tell my kids, you're better off having a crack at something and failing than not having a crack at it at all, because you're not going to know, like, if you don't try.
Absolutely
So
agree
then,
with that.
yeah, so got an audition tape together with a mate who's had a little PR business, and then they asked for a second audition tape, and then I was like, wow. And we would organise the golf trip to Barnbougle, Tasmania. So I said,
Yep.
mate, why don't we do the second audition tape in Barnbougle? It makes it tax deductible for both of us. Like, so let's do that.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, we did the second audition tape in Barnbougle. It sort of was a 12-month process, and then they rang me. I think it was April the 2nd or April the 3rd, and said, "Oh, we'd just like to offer you the position." I was like, "Yeah, okay." And then, but then they were like, "Oh, can you start filming in?" Essentially, it was like 10 days or a couple of
Oh, wow.
weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
So, what was a 12-month proposition as far as the duration of audition tapes and all that sort of stuff, then happened really quickly. Got to get in and get it done. So
Yeah,
and
wow.
then here I am, mate, re-signed we're about to start filming our third season for Selling Houses Australia, and the second one will start airing, I think, back end of March or start of April.
Yeah, nice. And just for reference for anyone who's needing, landscape services and whatnot, what areas do you service in Queensland and I'm guessing maybe New South Wales?
We'll like, mate, anywhere. So right the way through to Byron, all that sort of stuff, mate. Honestly, whoever wants to pay me to come and landscape their place, we can travel as far as we have to. Predominantly though, anywhere from Gold Coast to Sunshine Coast. We will accommodate.
Yep.
But we try and remain in the Brisbane sort of, I guess, area.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So anyone who's needing and or looking for landscape services, the links will be in the description below of this episode on Facebook and all that sort of stuff. Um, and I've got two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. First of all, what's next for Dennis Scott?
Mate, next is just holding on. Honestly, this selling houses Australia it's a bloody whirlwind, I tell you.
Yeah,
It's busy, so they've got a schedule which, when you look at it, you might as well just screw it up and throw it out because it just never runs to
yeah,
mate runs to schedule. And that's not anyone's fault. It's just a
no,
case of nature of the beast. You know, we had COVID where I was stuck away for 6 months. Like it's been a baptism of fire. So really, what's next for me is really, mate, trying to sort of utilize and make the most of this opportunity that I've been given with Selling Houses Australia.
yep,
And keep that ticking along and make that benefit my business. And now I don't necessarily need any more work. I've never had to advertise. We don't have signage on cars or anything like that. It's all been sort of just keeps ticking along. But what it may help me do is maybe choose some of the bigger jobs and some of the nicer jobs that I actually want to do instead of sort of doing a lot of
trudging along and going through the smaller jobs.
yeah, just going through the motions. So it actually might make, I might sort of be able to go, oh, look, let's do this job or let's do that job. So it gives me then that choice, hopefully.
Yeah.
So what's next for me, mate, is, getting my daughters into university and through school and, mate, just keeping things ticking along. Hopefully fit a house renovation in there, mate. Oh,
Yep.
the world's my oyster, really.
That's it.
No, but really, honestly, at the moment, it's just about consolidating where we're at
Yep.
and making the most of the opportunity that I've sort of been given through Foxtel and the Lifestyle Channel with Selling Houses Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last question, and I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is because it's been a sort of running theme throughout this interview, and it's what advice would you give for youngsters? I'll say what I think you're going to say, and then it's probably going to be different. But it's give it a crack because if you don't, you'll never know. You'd rather try and fail than never try at all, sort of thing.
Mate, absolutely. If you don't have a go, then you're never going to know, honestly.
It's a
So
great saying.
if you don't put yourself out there at the risk of failure, then you're never going to, really have you succeeded because it's one of those things. You just it's mate. If you don't have a go, you're never going to know.
That's it. Yeah.
And it is. And honestly, the other thing with the young guys is just work hard. And I guess in essence, with working hard and having a go, mate, I say it to my daughters all the time. It's a little running theme and a bit of a joke in our house. It's just like, mate, ultimately, just don't be a dick.
Yeah, literally.
Just say hello and look someone in the eye when you're shaking their hand and having a conversation. Just don't be a dick. Like, mate, don't be a dick. You're gonna go all right. Like, mate, life's there.
Pretty simple. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, for you to grab, like, just, mate. Yeah, don't be a dick. And if you don't have a go, you're never gonna know, mate.
And I think that's a